So President Donald Trump returns from a second summit with North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un with no deal. President Trump says that the North Korean leader offered to dismantle the country's most important nuclear facility if the U.S. lifted sanctions on the country, but he would not commit to doing the same for their weapons program.
President Trump called that a deal breaker, but says his relationship with Kim Jong Un is strong. Asia expert Gordon Chang tweeted about the summit, saying walking away from a bad nuke deal will freak out China, saying that we're counting on a trade agreement Beijing had no intention of honoring. Chang lived and worked in China and Hong Kong for almost 2 decades. He's given briefings at the National Intelligence Council, the CIA, and the Pentagon. In his book, Nuclear Showdown, Chang focuses on nuclear proliferation. He calls the North Korean conflict a crisis like no other. Gordon Chang joins us now from CPAC here in Washington, D.C., where he is a featured speaker. Gordon, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Gordon, so today at CPAC, I know that you have a packed schedule. We've had a lot of current events that are relevant to what you're talking about, North Korea and China. What do you want the takeaway to be from your talks for CPAC attendees this week?
Well, I think the most important thing, in terms of China is that they pose an existential threat to the United States, one which is, I think most Americans don't understand the full nature of. When you have Chinese leader Xi Jinping dropping hints that China is the world's only sovereign state, that is a challenge. But also, we saw the challenge recently in the form of North Korea because China's weaponized North Korea, and that gives us a big headache. And it's not just us, it's our friends in the region, especially Japan and South Korea.
What did you make of the lack of an outcome, lack of a deal coming out of this second summit with Kim Jong Un?
That was really important. I mean, the North Koreans were putting forth absurd proposals. Whether you accept their version of their proposal or what President Trump said at the press conference, nonetheless, President Trump should have walked away from Hanoi, and he did. And that's really important because it says to the North Koreans that they've got to negotiate in good faith. So this is a good thing. And as I mentioned in that tweet, the Chinese heard this loud and clear because we're involved in those trade negotiations. I think they were getting a little bit too confident in Beijing, and President Trump has pushed them back.
So, Gordon, what does this mean then for the next tranche of Chinese-U.S. trade negotiations? We, of course, had a deadline that the president extended for today. So now that you're saying the North Korea negotiations give us more leverage in China, how will the administration use that in the next coming weeks and months?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that we got a hint of that on Wednesday from U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer in his testimony before the House Ways and Means Committee. He said, look, we've got some structural issues that we have yet to resolve with China. And I think that when the Chinese sort of thought, President Trump's going to cave on those, a lot of people were saying the same thing. A lot of people were worried. And so right now, I think the Chinese are saying to themselves, look, we're probably going to have to give up more than we had anticipated. These are really tough negotiations. I'm not so sure you can get the Chinese to agree to change the entire nature of their economy and even their society. But nonetheless, they have a lot leverage today after President Trump walked out of Hanoi.
Gordon, the president has faced a lot of criticism for his remarks about American college student Otto Warmbier, who died, of course, after being held in North Korean custody and suffering severe injuries. The president said that Kim Jong Un told him he knew nothing about it, and the president takes him at his word. What did you make of those comments?
Yeah, we should not take Kim Jong Un at his word, and the president of the United States shouldn't say that. I believe that in the regime, especially a one-man state like North Korea, Kim Jong Un had to know what was going on for any foreigner that was held captive by the regime. So I don't accept that. I think what the president was trying to do was to maintain a good relationship with Kim. And there are reasons, of course, to do that, but I wouldn't have said it.
So, Gordon, now that we know China and the U.S. are continuing to negotiate on trade, what's next for North Korea? With the president coming back from Hanoi essentially empty-handed without a deal, what are the next steps the administration could take, or do you expect North Korea to be the next ones to make the move?
Well, the North Koreans have actually already made their move in the last couple of hours. They said, look, we would love to have a third summit with President Trump. Kim Jong Un is willing to talk. And this is really important because it shows that the North Koreans really do want and do need a deal. So, there might be momentum for a third meeting, but the North Koreans have shown the weakness of their hand by coming out and saying that. And so, I don't think President Trump actually walked out of Hanoi empty-handed. He came away, I think, with a lot more bargaining power.
Gordon, last question for you. The intelligence community here in the U.S. says that the North Koreans have no intention of denuclearizing. Do you disagree with that?
I agree with that, but that really doesn't tell us what we need to know. Under the current set of incentives, the North Koreans won't give up their weapons. But it's in the job description of the President of the United States to change those incentives on the North Koreans. And I believe that we can, without the use of force, convince Kim Jong Un to give up his most destructive weapons. We need to exert a lot of pressure on the North Koreans, of course, but also the Chinese, the Russians, and the South Koreans, all of whom have been openly violating sanctions. We do that, we can probably get Kim to realize he has a choice. He can keep his weapons, he can keep power, but not both.
Gordon Chang, thank you so much, and have fun at CPAC today.
Thank you.
Next up on Rising, the group Black Guns Matter wants to tackle the stigma that having a gun either makes you law enforcement or a bad guy.
By teaching young people responsible gun ownership. The theory is you can be a card-carrying good guy. Their founder explains more as Rising rocks on.